for rainbow or bridge of rainbow.
Okay, wonderful. So,
A guide to
I'll do a little introduction of you, Gilda, and then you'll be good to go.
Okay, thanks. Great.
And hold on just a second. I have to correct one thing.
Makes me want to watch Thor again.
Yeah.
Oh my God, the Rainbow Bridge is cracking again.
Okay, so
it's a very
Gilda,
beautiful drone.
Road construction to the upper realms.
So good evening, everyone, and welcome. Gilda Ko is going to run our show tonight, and she's going to talk about Norse divination cards called Bifrost, a guide to the Yggdrasil. And so I don't know why Jordan is pinned there, but I'm going to pin there's Gilda. Okay, Gilda, you're good to go, and tell me when you want to start the slideshow.
Okay, we'll start the slideshow already with the tree. That would be great.
Okay, I will do that.
And welcome everybody. It's tonight. We're going to discuss the Yggdrasil tree Norse divination cards by Hakur Halderson, and his daughter also had a hand in the artwork, G. Högdostir, and they're from Iceland. So it's pretty, has the take on this North tradition is deeply rooted in the Edda and the poetry of Iceland. Next slide.
Okay.
So there's a tree. Okay. It's Teutonic. In the Teutonic view of the world and of humanity, there have always been many dimensions of realms of reference. These multiple perspectives are rendered by a world tree they call Yggdrasil. This tree is said to consist of 9 realms or worlds. So there's gods at the top, the dead at the very bottom, light elves, dark elves, humans, ice, giant, dwarfs, and fire. This migratory people of Northern Europe, mostly hailing from Norway, Sweden, Denmark, British Isles, Germany, and Iceland, and to some lesser degree, Slavic coastal northern peripheral regions, carry a mystical field language and tradition which is embedded in the ancient script called the runes. So it's 24 runes. Some argue there's 16 or 33, but 24 is the standard. The cosmic Yggdrasil tree and the poetry in their ancient people, that has survived to date. Much of the shamanic sacred practices was forced underground and persecuted by the Greco-Roman and Judeo-Christian wave sweeping across Europe. Most of the written works were purposely burnt by the Christian movement. S. Edred Flowers, an expert in Norse and Northern myth and practices, comments that perhaps the Northern people's female sexual and sensuous goddess image and relevant practices might have been the leading crooks behind the devastating suppression. Next. Troth is a North language meaning faith or loyalty, and was a word revered in their sacred practices. Since in our tarot explorations here, we can only pair the entire movement of the Golden Dawn and their tough title tarot decks and occult theme books directly to the sacred word troth, minus the R. It also means is truth, faith as a way of truth, perhaps with the intention of updating his current field of practice from his past demise. There are a few details that caught my attention with reference to the Northern European traditions of myth and sacred practices in this deck. The Yggdrasil tree and the sacred cosmology behind their mystical language and runes. First, they differ from the roots of the Kabbalistic tree, for example, in that they carry a more applied phonetic attribute, rather than a stronger numerical connection as found underlying the Kabbalistic tree of life. Next. Next. Second, we detect an awareness of size, shape, and scale in their images correlates to differentiate dimensional worlds. For example, the dwarf and giant enigma allows us to access in metaphor the difference between a micro world or inner hidden microscopic world of dwarfs and elves, in contrast to the giant and godly macro worlds outside view or the expanse of the universe. So this in itself is represented in the images is the way in which they access these different psyche phenomena. Third, they are deeply connected to trees, animals, and oceans. And for the most part, there is little, if any, hierarchical male to female correspondence. Yet they all acquire husbands, wives, highly valuing each other. And they interact across worlds and scenarios, across space and time. And they're pretty much on even keel. We're going to explore herewith some of the phonetic nuances, including an example of a practitioner case study in these set of cards. Now, so this is a guide to the Yggdrasil, is Norse divination cards by, as we mentioned, Hauker Halderson and G. Hakdottir, his daughter, who renders the artistic hand. These two card images I chose, Mogut and Jarjar Brew, represent the hell realm at the very bottom. We chose them because, as you will see in our next slides, they make mention of sound in a very specific way. So next. So we begin with Mogut, the guardian of Jarjar Brew, the front entrance to hell. It's the daughter of Hellergrin, which means disorder. She is the guardian of the bridge of life and death. Like her father, Helregin, she guards the crossing, the Jarjar Brew, the front entrance to hell. She differs than her father in a way that she does not stand for disorder. She is noiseless, silent, and eerie, like the dead that pass over the bridge. Excuse me. When the dead pass her bridge, they don't make a sound, and she lets them through. If the living try to pass into hell through the Jarjar Brew, and they make sound, it gets amplified on their feet and creates a noise to alert Mogut, who then stops the living from advancing. So this is an example of how when our inner critic or our inner voice is constantly chirping, we cannot access silence, which silence is a bridge that allows us to access other dimensions. So this is an example of how they access sounds. So they're saying when there's a lot going on, a lot of sound, you cannot enter the bridge. You cannot access other dimensions. And we all know that about the monkey mind. So next slide. So Jarjar Brew, the crossing between life and death, the bridge, is the crossing between the realm of the living and hell, or world of the dead. If one stands between this bridge, one can only cross it dead. Once crossed over the hell, there is as good as no possibility for us mortals to cross over back to the realm of the living. This is their myth. The bridge is completely silent when the dead cross over. For the living, there is a warning when crossing. Sound is highly amplified. So this also speaks about dimension explorations, where when we practice meditations, or we might enter using other methods, dimensional worlds, that sound can amplify, entertain us, and cause us to miss the light, the bridge of something else that might be coming in. So, yes, so I wanted to share that a case study with a woman. We'll call her Froling. She wished to be anonymous. And she found herself one day in need of, from her home, accessing some form of sacred connection. And she began to chant the runes, in this case, the Norse runes, not just having an affinity to the North, the pictures, there was a resonance inside of her, and she began to chant these. It's like decoding language. The words there were no words specifically, just sound like fa, fe, fi, fo, fu, la, le, li, lo, lu, which is decoding language to the essence of syllables and consonants. And something happened when she started doing that. We'll get to it next. So next slide. So we're going to access Elfroom, Frosty, and Heindel as a sequence to the story. Elfroom, next, is feminine intellect, the world of the elves, queen of Alfheimar. Her name means the rune of the elves. She is said to live in an area on the border of Norway and Sweden in the summers, but resides in Asgard, God realms, in the winters. So she travels between Midgard, humans are in the middle, human middle realm, and Asgard, top of the tree, God realm. An indication that she's a goddess close to the heart of the common people because she crosses through their realm. She is said to know all runes and be a master of runic language and magical staffs. She indicates the ability or need to look closely and calm at the situation and read between the lines to observe if everything is as it seems, or if there is a feeling that something is missing. Elfroom brings the ability to piece information together, creating a greater picture, bringing a mixture of rational thinking, intuition, and an open mind to the moment at hand. Her knowledge of runic language is a formidable ally too, and she never works against the seeker, no matter her placement, even if she's placed in the hell realm world. She shines a light of wisdom and intuition under circumstantial sight. So when Froling started, like Elfroom, chanting the rune sounds, one day something happened and there was a breakthrough. So we'll go to the next one. Frosty, mindfulness, lightness, impermanence, world of ice. He represents the lightness of impermanence of the snowflake, and so the lightness of the spirit. Lightness can be seen as frivolous qualities, but also in some situations as great strength. The strength that comes with being mindful in the moment. In a way, his presence implements a lesser version of Fornjul's attribute of temperance through lightness. Frosty represents the moment, like music. He only exists in the moment we listen to it. And like the frost in the window only existing until you breathe on it, clear and cool but fleeting, unless he is in his element of ice and frost, then he lasts and is incredibly strong. So Froling was chanting, and Elfroom, the female side, opened, not knowing what to expect. And in the frosty realm where something can come in out of nowhere, she's just there waiting to see what that might be. And then the next card, Heindel shows up, a portal of, she goes through this portal, a complete stop of what was her psyche, and she's awake. She's standing doing a yoga asana while chanting. So she's embodying the sounds. And here comes Heindel. Waterway, opportunity or warning. World of humans. He is the guardian of the Bifrost, rainbow or bridge, guarding the connection between Midgard, center of the tree of the human world, and Asgard, God world. Heindel is the gateway of the seeker and his aspirations, or the guardian of gods and humans. Heindel lives at the root of the bridge, the rainbow. He has golden teeth and supernatural hearing and sight. He can hear the grass grow, the wool on the sheep, and can see as far as 100 miles in both darkness and light. He doesn't need sleep and is ever vigilant. He is born to 9 mothers, signaling 9 new beginnings, and has many names and many faces. He has a huge horn he blows into to make more sound, called Gajal horn, which he blows to warn the gods of giants. So Froling, there she was standing on a yogi pose, chanting away, decoding language, when suddenly in that realm of Frosty, momentarily, boom, the portal showed up and she went through it. And by going through it, we'll move on to what happened next. She went to another dimension, psychic dimension. And here, Dag, Bragi, and Herman will show us those dimensions. Next, Clara, she had absolute clarity of a connection. While she's awake inside her human body, doing a yoga posture and chanting, just decoding language, sounds that are found in the North tradition of the ruins. Now, Dag is the day personified, a god of us. Now, did we miss one? Yeah, there's one before Dag. The one prior to Dag is Bragi. Bragi was first. Yes. So what happened with the Froling, she was able to connect. Suddenly she could see her thoughts outside, moving along like a strip of the web, a strip you find in digital buildings telling you about the state of the stock market or modern news or the weather patterns, she could see it right in front of her, running like that. And she said, "Oh my God, look at what I'm thinking." She could see her inner thoughts that were running along, something that we are not able to see while we're awake. And she at that moment connected and united in truth that inside her being and the way that her daylight awareness works, there's a bridge that needs to be made because they are entirely separated. But they run each other without us knowing. Our inner psychic world of thoughts runs our actions in daylight, awake time. And she was able to see that clearly. So it was she could see it, she could hear it, and she's also outside doing her yoga posture chants. She could also witness what was going on. So here we have, through language, poetry, and expression, a unity between a giant and his wife comes from the dwarf world. So the macro inside world, micro, and the outside reality of our macro world united at that, by going through that portal through Heindel, united. And there was a moment of truth, or truth, as the North like to call it, that became part of Froling's reality. And she did not acquire that truth by nowhere else. Nobody told her you need to believe this or anything. She experienced that connection between the inner world and the outer world, and is clearly stated in these cards. See the Bragi there with his little flute singing. There's a marriage there of the two, and something truth occurred. So next card would be Dag. No, Dag would be the next card, is out of order. Dag. So Dag, he is the day personified, a god of Asgard, representing light, activity, and clarity. In other words, Froling at that moment achieved a unity of light, activity, and clarity all at once. She saw it running in front of her, she heard it, and she was here inside her body, awake, standing, doing a yoga posture. He has a bright mane horse called Skin Foxy. He rides around the sky every 24 hours, lightening up the sky according to Odin, the most powerful of all the gods in the realm of the Norse. He brings new possibilities, new ideas, and has the ability to renew any situation and reset the seeker's inquiries. So this card shows him paused, watching the clarity, the light, and the surprise of something new that he has discovered across all of his bodies. So therefore, it is the truth that he embodies of realization. It's a realization, an embodiment of a realizing truth for him. So then we go to the next one. And here is Herman. So look at Herman, what he's got in his head. He's got this cosmic 8-sided crown, and we've got Saturn in the background. He's got 4 hands and 2 feet, and he's he represents a god of reconciliation between the above and below of the sky and the earth, of hell and Asgard, the world of the gods. The Norse people symbolically erected columns called Irmisulur to try to connect the earth and the sky as a way of reconciling opposites. He represents a connection and concurrence between seemingly irreconcilable contraries. So this is what happened to Froling when she was doing the experiment. She reconciled the outer awareness that runs her every day when she's awake with her inner psyche, which also runs her, but is invisible. And she's never aware of it, except in her dreams, perhaps, and if she pays attention to her dreams, or in meditation, or in this case, she was tapping into the great field behind the sound, resonance, vibration of this language, decoded because there were no specific defined words behind her chanting. She was chanting consonants and vowels in their pristine primal sound. La le li lo lu, 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 la le li lo lu. So if she went high, she tapped onto vibrations of the sky. When she took the sound very, very low, her feet, as she stood in the yoga posture, connected to the streams of vibration from the earth, and up and down the tree, up and down her own chakra tree, she was able to access these marvelous truths that began to display in her, in this experience that graced her that day. And that's the presentation. In the chat, well, we will try to place these. These are 10 books on the mythology of the Northern tradition, very reputable, and they're Eddas and stories placed in poetry style, which is also called Twilight language. And for the latest scientific news on sound resonance, how that impacts and connects our right brain to the left brain and actually tunes our entire body system, which the Indian tradition is also very, very ancient and very evolved in using these tuning sound vibrations. You can check out Dr. Jeffrey Thompson's book Facebook page. He has a podcast program every Sunday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern U.S. time, and it's free. And he's done about 300 of those, and he's a scientist and mainly an artist, also working as a chiropractor. He was a chiropractor, holistic, and there's a lot of information there about sounds. And he's been working with this for a long time, trying to synchronize maybe the sounds with people, like tick tock, tick tock. There's an experiment with all these little tick tock, and they're all not synchronized. One does tick, the other does tock. And when they're next to each other, after a few minutes, they all synchronize themselves. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Like if us humans were in a circle and we were all tuned, our heart beats would synchronize and the power would increase because we were tuned and synchronized. And silence has sound, but it's very subtle. And inside we carry sounds. And chanting allows us to access this bridge that the Norse tradition was talking about and mentions in this divinatory deck. So we're opening the floor for anyone who likes to explore any of these images or has any questions. We chose them randomly because they told the case story that we presented. There's 81 cards and 9 realms, and the human realm is the one in the middle. And they use animals, like I mentioned. At the top of the tree, there's an eagle, and the eagle sees everything and spans his wings and can cover and protect the ones below. And there's a squirrel that runs from the roots of the tree called Ratatorskur, and it goes up and down from the roots to the eagle, bringing the news. It's like telling the latest gossip or news or whatever, up and down the stem of the tree. And at the roots we have serpents and dragons gnawing at the roots. And in the middle, where the humans are, there's 4 stags that have significance, and it's like the 4 realms that are outside the chakra tree. We have a chakra tree, and the Yggdrasil tree also has chakras, 5 chakras going up and down. The root, the center.
I thought it was very interesting today, Gilda, when you were talking about the southern approach, which is things like voodoo, etc., and then the Middle European approach.
Okay. Yeah, I'll bring that one. In the book called Leaves of Yggdrasil, which is the tree, written by Freya Aswin, Aswinn, right here. She speaks about, she says that in the West, we find the Western mysteries and an amalgam of Kabbalism and Grail mysticism together with Greek, Roman, and Egyptian magic and the homegrown system known as Wicca. The Eastern traditions, such as Buddhism and Hinduism, and of course the Chinese and Japanese and Orientals, is also represented. And in the Southern current, represented by the African traditions, Yoruba, Voodoo, Santeria, Macumba, and all the different other, I'm sure the Indian traditions of the Americas, are all have all been up and down represented. And she says that the North has not been. The Norse, the Northern is missing. And so she says there's an empty space there for the Norse tradition too. So there's an imbalance. When the Norse tradition, which we have just ran a little synopsis about, then would be a very good, the balance would be there. And is magnetic north. The north has a magnetic gravitational resonance. And it, as I mentioned, because it's been put down, has been repressed. So it's an enormous field. It is powerful. It's a field that for those who resonate with it, is fresh and primitive, and it has a lot of primordial strength. Pristine, rather pristine, because it's been hidden. So, but it also has power. Like during the World Wars, it was last century was started to be used by the Germanic, but eventually that, just like in Jungian analysis, things that come out of the unconscious and become like the Germans got out of control, and it became a horror show because the unconscious archetype just took over without, because it hadn't been addressed, and it just blew into proportions of horrific.
Nobody understood what they were doing.
Exactly. And then so whether it's what the archetype and then the reactions and the whole thing just got out of control. Well,
yeah, some of them understood what they were doing, but they whipped people up pretty good.
So to address the North and the Northern tradition and incorporate it into what she mentioned in that book, it's a great, it's, and well, and take what you can use and leave the rest. Whatever works and is empowering, then that's great. And the Froling having happened to have her resonance on it came to her. It was something that she wasn't aware of, and but she tapped into it because her resonance was opened, and it came. So it might be because she was residing in the north, but not because that was her heritage. So that's why I brought that case study, because that was something that was experienced just out of the field and out of the void. And they sound related, and sound related is something that's usually not quite, since it's not written or a number, but it is perhaps also found in music theory, the 3 octaves and worlds. So eventually it might just be one of the next things that humans incorporate into their evolution. But you can show any of the cards and see. We welcome any of the panelists' observation about what the cards mean, represent.
Yeah.
Three key points jumped at me archetypally with Mogut, who she is the guardian of the bridge of life and death, was very similar to Ma'at, M-A-apostrophe-A-T, the guardian of the afterlife, and to admit the weighs the heart against a feather for balance of a life that deserves the afterlife. And then with Elfroom, the put things together, creating a bigger picture with intellect and intuition, reminded me so much of Pallas Athena or Minerva, and even at a higher octave, Astrea, both of which who would make Mars' warring tendencies look like he's playing checkers to their 3-level chess, because they have the strategy of intuition, which is also a basic building block of structure, which then led me to the Saturn component you brought up with Herman, and the reconciliation of the opposites architecturally, especially with Saturn, would be how structure begins to come into being. Nothing is without its other. So it was interesting to me the way these tracked through archetypes from other systems, but with a different, refreshed cultural perspective. You know, very, very North, very, very ice, very, very specific. Because, I mean, it's almost, you know, if you had a bad crop in the Mediterranean, you know, you just go fishing in the winter. But in Novgorod, you have a bad crop and you die. You know, so there's the Norse had a very, to me, it's one of their boldest pieces, is that they're so direct and clear because they have to, because of the land. So it's interesting to me how weather and just the earthly temperature considerations really give a different undertone and overtone to these characters in this deck that you brought up, that sync with, you know, Pallas Athena and Mahat from Egypt, etc. But they're like fraternal twins rather than identical twins.
Yes.
So there's a dignity and a difference that really I found interesting as you went through. And the one last piece that really jumped out was Troth, and then Toth minus the R. It's minus the Hebraic Resh character, which is the inner sun, which then gives Troth warmth in the cold, whereas Toth more southerly doesn't need that warmth as much, so truncates to drop the R. So that was just kind of fun language and culture that seemed to jump out archetypally to me.
And that Troth to them meant faith and loyalty. So meaning truth. It actually, Troth is truth, comes from truth. And another thing that they mention is that the English language comes from all of these sounds. It is the English language is embedded in these sounds.
Yeah, the la, la, li, lo, lu.
and
that you
ing and all of these words we use. So by virtue of anyone who speaks English, they are already connected, according to one of my books, is we are already connected into part of the stream of this field.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of English comes out of the Norse and northern Germany.
It
Right.
does.
I just want to point out, I don't think, I could be wrong in saying this, but I don't think there's, to me, that's not a very sound connection between Toth, Troth, maybe Troth and Truth. I don't know about Norse language, but you were referring to the Toth deck, and it's simply pronounced Toth, but it's spelled Thoth. And it's the Egyptian god Thoth.
Of wisdom, right?
So it's not just an absence of an R that you're missing there. It's TH versus TROTH, which is no little difference, I don't think. I mean,
T,
Well,
how do you spell
name
top?
is quite
T-O-T-H. And that is T-R.
T-H-O-T-H. I think you're absolutely right, Nick. And at the same time, on the other hand, beautifully wrong, because the H is silent. So the silence has the sound of subtlety. So in a sense, it disappears. And so I think you're absolutely right that it's a loose connection, if one at all. And at the same time, since it's a silent H, I mean, the lale, lila, lu drops into our vowels, but there's always a consonant with a vowel. And the Nordic language is often double G's and double N's. So the language itself is an allusion to the Om or meditation, because it lengthens the sound to double the consonants or the vowels. But I think you're right in terms of a connection of just dropping the R. It's not. That's not terribly valid, if at all.
And also, the word, some of the early words that we might have used that are inherited from our the ancestor languages are like pistis and stuff like that, which means truth, faith, loyalty,
right, kind
of thing. But that's off piece. Sorry.
Well, it's not really off piece, because then a pistis, and then if I go to a flower and a pistil, P-I-S-T-I-L, it's the fertilizing portion, and truth then nourishes the language, fertilizes the language in that sense. And so I think the pistis is a very, very good thing to bring in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm being pedantic. I just wanted to point that out.
I'm looking for my Toth deck. How do you spell Toth? The
T-H.
T-H-O-T-H.
T-H-O-T-H, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, here I'll have to look it up. I believe that in whatever it's did I spell it T-O-T-H? Well, I'll have to look it up and verify, but when I was looking at it, it appeared to be the same. So I stand, if it's not, I stand to be corrected. And if it is, then since the Golden Dawn was created in Britain, which is a Teutonic country, they had to know about that word, which means truth and is related. Now, when we add the Middle Eastern and Kabbalistic and whatever else that has been embedded in the tarot, then of course thought is also an English word. So it's the roots and whatever else is all coming from the same place.
Gilda, with troth and tough, T-R-O-T-H and T-O-T-H, is there an umlaut over the O so it's long, which would be troth and toth?
I have to, I'm not an expert.
Troth would be, with a long O, would be more congruent to truth with a long U. If there was an umlaut, I don't know that. Just curious.
I mean, just like we can make a reference. Sound, the North and the English are sounds that come from the same place. They are related in language. And
right.
It's Germanic languages. In the tree of languages, it comes from the English is out of the Germanic branch of the tree. And I have it in a dictionary, so that's not to tell me that that's not true. I don't know, because I can bring out the dictionary right now and take a picture, and it is so. So, and this was created in Britain. It wasn't developed in Egypt. it was developed, the Golden Dawn came out of Britain. And
Right.
as far as I know, Britain is one of the very few Teutonic places.
Completely. And I asked about in terms of pronunciation, because you bring in very strongly in your presentation the meditative and chant or incantational. You didn't use that word, but the incantation, where pronunciation is actually of primary importance, actually more than even the knowledge, just to induce the sounds properly. And if the sounds are basically mispronounced, the incantation doesn't work because it leaves parts of the body out of the resonance. So I just, that's why I was curious about the O and troth or troth and troth and toth.
And I mean, understand that we're also dealing with invisible resonance. It's not something that you can write down, or I mean, you can use musical theory, and you can write things down, but we're here making a connection with the invisible world that we carry in our microcosm inside ourselves, which also includes sound. Listening is sound. Talking is related to sound. Writing is related to sound. And speaking is related to sound. And that is something that is hardly addressed, let's say, in a regular tarot deck.
Well, and that's why I bring up the pronunciation, because you're by the pronunciation, you're invoking the wisdom within. And there are things that are unsaid, but they are sounded. And then that brings up the silent underpinnings of the invisible. Exactly.
It gives it animates it like a spark, and then it constellates into that, I don't know, constellate. For Froling, it constellated into her ability to be able to connect the inner and outer. At that point, go through a portal like Heindel and make that connection through that feminine, I mean, being opened into the nothing world of Frosty, which is only a moment. And then suddenly something took, and there was a portal, went through, and something just manifested right there. She could see the thoughts outside, she could hear them, and she was over here standing doing a yoga posture. I mean, how incredible is that?
Such things definitely work.
And how and so no one can say, oh no, what we have inside is this. No. She was and our what we have inside is our inner being knows our entire history, plus some more, the genetic, the soul. It's like the Akashic records or our library. It knows everything. But can we access that when we're awake through doing intellectual work? No. We can play.
Not through intellectual work. Yes.
No.
Right.
So to connect the two, but you need to be awake during the day in order to be able to, with your regular conscious daylight awareness, in order to be aware of it also. So there's a connection that unites the two. It's like a reconciliation.
That is actually close enough to a question that I wanted to make, because the part that interested me the most is that Heindel was the one able to hear her chantings, I believe, right? Because
he hears it.
Yeah, but there's this difference between hearing actual thoughts, because when she was, I believe, what I understood about the story is that when she was thinking her own thoughts rationally and through words, she was not connected at all to those possibilities and to those gates. And then when she was in this posture of meditation, and then she started to chant, I believe that through song and perhaps through some sort of more creativity way of using words or sounds, then she was connected to Heindel. Is that so?
Yes, she was connected to the portal that he represents, which allowed her to go through it. And because she was doing a yoga posture, that's acting like an antenna So sound and antenna, like in wavelength, in reality, the magnetic quality of the human body in that case, being resonated with sound, was able to connect into a wavelength, and what that yielded was what she mentioned to me in that detail. Meaning all three things were perceived at the same time, and we're never able to perceive when we're awake that there's chatter, there's monkey mind, there's inner critic, there's all kinds of things going on, which we act on that, and we don't know. We think we're in control. Oh, I'm going to go do this or that. But in reality, she made the discovery that it's already been there, and it's prompting what goes on in the daylight awareness. And so to not be aware of that is not to be aware of the microcosm world, which is just as huge as the outer world.
Yeah.
That brings up a great point, Raquel, about the interpretive component of language and thought and communication, using words and communicating in that case is actually a disconnecting experience, rather than, so that it brings a distinction between communication that invokes the heart of the matter as its fuel versus chatter, and the words are completely then disconnecting in regards to experience. That's I hadn't thought about that distinction before, but that's interesting, the power of words there, whether the communication is disconnecting or the communication is connecting.
Yeah, and if we think about our society as we understand each other, I mean, communication and words is always seen as a bridge of connection, of connecting one another. But from this perspective, I believe that going through this higher self, perhaps, then this communication that we use with one another may not be enough, and especially it may be even an obstacle.
Yeah, because it's how to communicate those things which need or require no words, that the feeling expression, communication in the words, rather than Jack ran through the forest kind of words.
I think it's an evolution. It's an evolution step for humanity, to be able to tap and incorporate and develop and cultivate that aspect which we all have.
Right.
But it seems like technology, and I don't just mean digital and all that, but I mean even like cars or machinery, late 1800s, 19th century, that technology has brought more noise to humans. And it's not only that it's noise, but it's also ways to fill the space with noise as a choice. And
it's racket.
So, people talk to me about like, oh, have you listened to this podcast? It's like, am I going to just, envelop my mind in the sound and words and kind of entertainment, quote unquote, of, I don't care what it is. There's some Jungian podcast that my daughter keeps saying, oh, it seems like, you would enjoy this. We listened, it's not even watching. We listened for like 10 minutes in the car. I was like, no, but that, and forgive me, these may be odd connections, but the first time I ever was with a person who had the radio on 24 hours a day, it was Andy Warhol's assistant. And I knew that what was going on in the factory, Andy Warhol's factory, was just constant barrage of activity and noise. And that was a kind of cultural moment. But it also, I think, represents the direction that everything was going. Then the first household I was ever in, where the television was going 24/7, was Robert Rauschenberg's household. And it's funny, I've never thought of that until right now, although, you know, that those were the two people whose places I was in. And that was this 24/7 noise, because I have always been a person looking for the silence and treasuring my moments of silence, not only as far as the sacred goes, but also I'm a writer. And when I earn my living, I'm an editor, and I want total silence. So it's something's going on in the world. And I wonder about people sometimes about that disconnect of, I like the contrast Jordan just made of chatter and matter.
Yeah.
What matters,
Right.
Yeah, that's a
I
great
think
way.
and the
Chatter.
filling in of chatter, which is, the chatter is monkey mind. Even when it's the television, it's monkey mind, you know.
yeah.
Even when it's outside us, it's monkey mind, I feel.
Well, you
Well,
bring up
I
point.
think it's critical to understand that in our modern age, we generally have convinced people that they have to be listening to something all the time.
Yeah,
And
no.
pardon?
I said, yeah, and no. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like,
but I remember when I was 40, I was listening to things quite a lot on the radio, for in the car, for example, because I had a hour and a half commute each way.
Right.
And you know, finally I just turned off the radio one time, and I haven't turned it back on. I mean, occasionally we'll listen to, you know, a book on tape, or you know, an audible book or something like that, but I never listen to this stuff. I mean, we have cases filled with CDs that we bought over the years, and we used to listen to it a lot, but I can't even listen to it anymore. Now, I do have tinnitus, so I have 12 frequencies of fax tone going on in my mind all the time, but I'm not aware of the tinnitus except if I mention it to you. If I don't mention it, I don't think about it. And I feel like I'm in silence, but although I never am, including when I'm asleep. But I just found when I was 40, I just turned off the car radio, and I just never have turned it back on again.
right.
You know,
I'm
unless
just saying,
there's a news story that has to be followed or something like that. But
yeah, I'll listen to the car. I'll listen to the wind. But in the car is my break from, and it's not silent. I mean, you know, you use car sounds and window up or window down. But I like what you said, Annabelle, though, about the chatter versus matter. It reminds me of the quote that art drives culture. Technology simply supports it, like a toothpick after dinner. But these days, there are too many columns. You know, this Arminsulur that Gilda brought up, you know, to reach to the sky, to connect the earth to the sky. But now it's like there are too many antennas, too many columns. You can't walk through the architecture and the space because the space has all been filled with columns and structure. And the clarity, basically clarity of vision, is stifled because you can't see the forest for the trees. There are too many damn trees, so to speak, in the structures. And instead of that logos ego vessel of a structure that then chatter versus matter, you pour the heart of the matter into, but that vessel is very simple. it's basically 1, 2, 3, 4 columns tops. And then you have the space between and around. But when you started saying that, I just got the art drives culture, technology simply supports it, or the structures it, that the whole thing is now not filled with art. It's filled with all these baffling superficial columns. Like we always have to bump into something or listen to something. And I'm like, I'll make a podcast, but even my readings, people are like, you aren't recording them anymore. I'm like, well, because I never listen to them again. And, and I actually ask my clients, do you actually listen to them? No, but I might miss something. But are you ever going to go back and listen? So there are these compulsive expectations of having to record everything as if we're so accountable for everything, except where's the truth and loyalty in that? I
have a good example of that, because my mom, until this day, she is always with the radio on, always, all the time.
Yes.
In every house that she goes, even in mine, when she's visiting me, the first thing that she does is turn on the radio. And she always picks these news stations that always talk about crimes and death and assault, and it's just horrible. And my mom is just going around through the house and doing her stuff, and it's just like that. Usually when I was still living with her, I always, like, this point of the day, I was going like, are you listening to this? This is horrible. How can you, like, you're like doing your work and living
Well,
your life?
I know an answer to that, Raquel, and maybe you can help your mother, because here in the States, we always have an eyewitness news station. Typically it's ABC, I think, but anyway, they always say, watch the news and the weather and blood at 11. And and they always lead with some gory story.
Yeah.
And so I was talking to a friend of mine who's a psychologist. He teaches at Skidmore College, and he said, well, people need that because if they know that's out there, then they're okay.
Right.
Wow.
Right.
It's interesting you say that, Skip.
Pardon?
It's interesting you say that, especially in tandem with Raquel's mom, because when my nephew, this was 12 years ago, when my nephew was 4, my sister said, hey, don't you want to come watch the news with us? No, it's the same every day. I'm going to go read Grimm's. And he disappears, and she goes, come back. What do you mean it's the same every day? He goes, look, first they have the crimes and the killings. Then they do the weather, and then they make you wait for the sports. I want the good stuff. I'll be back later when they have the sports. And he disappeared in his room, but 4 years old. And he's like, oh, first they have the killings and the crime, and then they have the sports. And it's the same thing. And he was like,
right,
the tears, and he was only 4.
It's just like the cable TV right now. It's just incessant stuff about, oh my God, this is the end of the world for the Afghans type thing. And, that's why I sent around that piece that I think maybe only Jordan saw, but
or for the grandkids, yeah.
I saw it.
Because and the piece was written by my wife about 2 people that we know, and the point is that well, Colleen the other day asked, well, what's going to happen to the Afghan women now that we're out of there and we're not protecting them anymore? And the answer is, the Afghan women are going to protect themselves as they always have, and but now they're going to have lots more assets. And here's the proof. And the proof I gave, or Debbie gave, was this Afghan woman that we worked with in the early 80s, who spent all of her time. She was an Afghan refugee in 1979 or something like that. And, she spent all of her time ever after trying to help Afghan women. And the result was that she got a ministry of women in the Afghan government. Now, what will happen with that, I don't know in the short term, but what I do know, and probably the reason that we are seeing such cooperation from the Taliban right now, is all of a sudden they're sort of shaking in their boots because, oh, by the way, there is going to come a time when the last person comes out and they're shaking in their boots because now they have to deliver to their country. And a lot of these groups are not necessarily attached to the central group.
Well, and that's a great point too. It goes along with just the philosophy of anarchy. People overthrow. That's cool. Now what? What do? You put back in a system that you pretty much just threw out, but it may have a different tenor to it. But the anarchy is only anarchy for that quirk of a glimpse of several moments across months with a pond of the government turning over, and then, oops, well, now what you're going to do?
And there's, they're talking about the brain drain coming out of Afghanistan. Well, yeah, yes, right. It is. And oh, by the way, all your brains are going to be out here. And what are you going to do about it then? How are you going to feed these 39 million people?
Right.
And go ahead.
Yeah. So, the cards themselves, the imagery is, if anyone cares to comment about the different symbolic images, there's structure, there's animals, there's Elfroom. I particularly like her profile, and the female, they actually drew a version of the side of the brain that's feminine, and the psyche, how that function, which has all kinds of geometry, and it's silence is not empty. Silence has vibration and a lot going on.
Yeah.
And she has the innovation of contacting it and listening and waiting.
Yeah. How do you hear yourself think?
Something, and it's beyond thinking, because you can hear yourself think, but when you can experience who's thinking and what is thinking, who's thinking, what is thinking, when you're awake and not just your will or your ego running, oh, you need to go do this, or oh, it's kind of like, I used to do it myself, an escape. You chase your thoughts all the time. We chase our thoughts, we don't even know we're doing it. And so these people were primitive, were primordial, I would say. And they were aware of these things. And we don't hear much about it nowadays, because precisely what everyone here is mentioning, that is that entertainment is another word for distraction.
Yeah.
Right. Entertainment equals distraction, and you're distracting from what? From your truth, from growing, from evolving the humanity that you carry. Versus going out.
Makes a distinction between music and noise. I mean, the cat runs through the house and stirs up the energy, stirs up the chi. You put on really good music, and it becomes white noise, but it's resonant. But you have news or something, and it's just this staccato, arrhythmic, discordant chatter. And when you brought up the feminine side of the brain there, it reminds me of the sagittal section through the brain. If you cut, right through the middle, the eye of Horus, where you have the pineal gland and the amygdala and all of the limbic system and the pituitary that make that eye, literally, if you cut right through the middle, that's the eye of Horus. It looks like that in the brain. And they knew that from their neuroscience.
They knew that
The
then.
Egyptians actually did brain surgery, and there are skulls that have been found that have holes drilled, but they could tell by the new ossification, the post-birth skull, that the person lived for at least 16 or 17 years of new bone growth, which means that the surgery was a success.
Yeah.
And so that feminine side of the brain, I mean, is kind of a joke. It's the, left-handed people are the only ones in their right mind, kind of thing. But when they look at specifically that symbol of the feminine view, the feminine side of the brain, on your left side, the sacred feminine, you get a different perspective than when you turn 180 degrees and turn around and look at the male side. So in one sense, they're looking at each other if you pull them apart and turn them, and so that connection side by side versus when you just saw, the feminine brain you brought up, that's a really, if maybe we could bring that card image up.
Yeah, there's Elfroom and Frosty, because Frosty shows what Elfroom is doing.
Right.
She's
Okay.
involved in opened using sound as a way of resonating, and then there's this field of Frosty where something can come in any moment, but if you're not paying attention, there's no way you will see
Right.
it. Okay, so that's the point of noise, and then so she's paying attention, and then the portal shows up, Heindel, where she goes through it, right?
Right.
So you could see the image there, the way that that he drew. There's a lot going on, but her eye is open and she's awake, aware. She's not distracted. She doesn't look lost. She doesn't look entertained. She is there. And
I think it's interesting to talk about a portal because there's a new television program on Fox, believe it or not, which is a takeoff on Fantasy Island. And I don't know if any of you have seen this, but they've only done 3 episodes so far. The third, or 2 episodes so far. The third one is tomorrow. But basically, the idea is that you get to live a fantasy during your stay on Fantasy Island. And the truth is that we can all live our fantasy every day of the week.
That's exactly right.
We don't need to be directed by anybody. So one example of one of the little subplots there was that an older couple comes to the island, and the husband and wife, the wife is diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. And so they want to have this fantasy where they're back as they were when they were young. And so they kiss and boom, they're young again. But then, very interesting twist, the wife goes off somewhere and she gets a tattoo on her back, and the woman who plays Miss Rourke, used to be Mr. Rourke, sees the tattoo and sees that tattoo is the symbol of the island, and so she invites the woman to stay. And so at the end of the episode, the husband leaves on the plane as an old man again, but his wife, who has terminal cancer, stays in the fantasy state and becomes Tattoo, which was, of course, the character in the original Fantasy Island 40 years ago. And so now she's become the assistant of Miss Rourke, and and she's tattoo. Interesting idea, very interesting idea. But the point is that it's talking about this portal, a portal, and how, you know, literally any of us at any time can have a fantasy, and you know, I could be sitting here and have 50 of them while you guys are talking,
Right.
which I probably did, but anyway, go
But
ahead.
it's different than accessing a portal of truth that is embedded, that is authentic. It's a revelation of the development of the human being. That's different than fantasizing. I used to sit and I could fantasize from here to China forever.
Sure.
And then that reality one day comes around because, oh, I intended it, I fantasized it. But it is very different than portals that transform you. Fantasy doesn't transform you. It only entertains you and creates scenarios, but it does not transform you or evolve you. So that's the difference about
and
this.
so this is the point that Jung was always making, that you have to become the individual.
Exactly.
Right.
And you have to turn off the radio and listen to yourself.
Right.
Right. And that's the point.
You become an individual and you listen to yourself, and then you can share with others something interesting and wonderful.
And that image right there of Elfroom too, it's very much the labellum of the orchids, which is the labia and female genitalia, but that's the yoniverse. So, you know, she's going in, she's emanating out, and the yoniverse being that from which all emanates. And so there's that kind of mother of the universe as a portal, in a way that card seems to be very, very directly speaking to. She's, because if you go in close, you get on the right, you get the concentric elliptical, they're kind of labellum, like an orchid petals, the inner petals of an orchid, which would be the same female genitalia thing with labia, but that yoniverse, she's coming, she's going. In one sense, she's Janus, to and from both at the same time, but only has one face. She doesn't need the two faces because the portal's there to come and go through.
And notice that there's the eye. If you really look at it, it's rather small there, but in reality, the eye is almost like one eye looking directed.
Looking directly at you,
Exactly.
Right.
The eye is one eye, and it's big, and it is channeled, but it's open for things to happen.
And that one eye like that then implies to me symbolically that she has a completely different perspective. You know,
she's engaged also. She's engaged. Her eyes open. She's engaged in the process, which she cultivated her resonance and connectivity in order to become what she became. So if you're entertained, you can't do that.
You take the portal behind, and that's very feminine, and you take her, she's very feminine, but she's looking at us directly through her right eye, which is on the sacred masculine side. So there's both and occurring there. So there's the concrete vision from the masculine structure, but the art and the life coming from the feminine creative drive, creative force.
And now can we see Heindel, where the portal, and she goes through the portal in the case study, otherwise she would not be able to have the experience that she had. So if we watch the Heindel card, it requires courage, it requires strength, and his mouth is open, like going, can we see it bigger? Yeah, his mouth is open, so there's sound, full sound, rushing right through that portal in order to be able to make it through. See?
Yeah.
He's speaking sound. Okay, his mouth is open. It's not open to allow a fly to come in, right? It's open because there is this
the
powerful
rooms-
sound to be able to go through.
Yeah.
So it's got sound going on.
Well,
Well,
could you scroll down a little, Skip? It's interesting. I'm curious which rune is in the keystone of the arch, which is where it locks at the top.
Well, that would be here.
Right there.
That's an eye, the eye of the literati, probably.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. Yeah, so vision brings everything together. Vision holds it together, because without that one keystone, the arch has no arch action and it falls. But when you put it in, all the forces resolve throughout the whole structure, and then no force is applied other than down and some haunch action horizontally to push outward.
Yeah, so I what I like about the Norse is also and that they incorporate the strength of the body, the sound, and the whole thrust. There's a thrust, for example, and the animals are in this deck. There's some, not a lot, but in the entire system, that the Odin, which is has wolves and crows, that talk to him. They're always talking. They talk to heads and they talk to animals and things.
Yeah, Justin says, Justin Case says, directly translated, Heimdal means home valley.
There you go. Going through the portal to the home valley of integrating your inner and outer awareness.
And what's interesting, this arch feels, they're very much seeing the inside of the arch. They're very much teeth, molars, and it's as if this is the mouth of the universe and he is the voice that it comes out and emanates from it.
Yes, exactly.
His voice literally with the sword raised cuts through and comes out.
So the voice is the sound is represented in the images as a working part of it. It's not just adding numbers or going back and the actual just images. There's sound. It's very difficult to portray sound in visuals. It's not easy.
Right, and to Justin Case's point, the home valley. This would be an earth-born Valhalla, the heaven on earth of the home valley that then trains you for the Valhalla of the afterlife, from a mythic standpoint.
And if we look at the Mogut, right?
Right.
Which is the skeleton. It's not just the skeleton. It is inside our own, inside an outline of a head with a pentacle right here. So, and it also has as a neck kind of a symbol of a phallic symbol. If you can see, Mogut, it's a skeleton head. Further back.
Here's a fair question from Neil Scott. Is there such a thing as outer awareness? It's all inner, or is it all inner?
Okay, I'll take a crack at it. We live in duality, so I hope you understand good and bad, cold or hot, and they all have properties. The same thing, the duality of inner and outer. But when studies have been shown, inner arrives first. It is constellated first before the outer manifests into form and action and whatever else. It is first conjured, is first in your psyche, in the place of your inner world. But it is obviously connected. It is interrelated. You sleep every day and you have to sleep. Why do we all sleep? Because we have to access that world. Otherwise, we can't live. So it's just a matter of whether there's a lot of studies now But meditation, all of that allows, and that case study I mentioned allows for the realization to occur that the inner functions of our awareness and consciousness is so vast and so virtual, like the computer, that it rules our actions. So it happens before, and we don't know. We don't, if we're not paying attention, we believe that when we're awake, we know what we're doing and we're in charge.
Yeah.
Well, I love that question. I'd like to take a crack too. Inner awareness versus outer awareness. And it's interesting if I look, I feel this very resonantly daily now because I'm in my cabin at 9,300 feet and bears, mountain lions, wild turkeys, etc. A lot of funny chipmunks. But it's interesting to me that even if I use I am connected to nature because I am also nature, my environmental awareness of my surroundings, aka an outer awareness, actually pings me from my internal radar. So nature to me coming to us would be an outer awareness, but not necessarily mine. So it feels like in terms of outer awareness, I might modify the outer to be just to be nature, that which how our context communicates to us. But nature has no awareness or emotions; it only has weather. And so it's interesting to me. I think the inner awareness is there, is emotional, is present, but an outer awareness would seem to me to be nature and weather, and that counterpoints the emotional. So it feels like they dance together, but I don't personally feel I have an out of body awareness, if that's what the question was kind of implying to take a stab at, of an outer awareness.
Yeah, I put out the headless way in the chat for his question. There's a famous person, I can't tell you right now the name, his name is not coming to me, and it's called the headless way, and people go and take classes, and all you do is sit there and take your fingers and move them like this, and all of a sudden, are you still there? Because you don't no longer see your fingers. Are you still there? Because you don't, the fingers are back here, but you know they're back here, but you can't really see them. So then he has all these exercises, and then it's called the headless way. You realize that that's really a projection. We project, but when we stop projecting, then we are aware that we're actually reflective beings.
Oh,
But
sure.
check out the head like a child. They see they're aware, but and then they find their fingers. And then they start looking at their body, but they can't see their body until they're able to see it. Just like we can't see our face unless we have a mirror, right? So who's seeing? Who's seeing? Who's the one that sees? It's you. It's the consciousness.
The headless way it sounds like a wonderful concept, but it's almost like people saying that they're light beings. And there's such a often imbalance that as soon as something goes wrong, it's one giant tantrum, like a little kid who didn't get his chocolate or something. And they don't have any depthful dark that they base in. And the headless way, to me, it's kind of dangerous to start amputating things. Like people say, lose your ego. It's like, no. Strengthen your ego. Just lose the egomania. And,
but that's what he calls the program. Right. When you go to the program, you realize it's nothing to do with, getting rid of your head or anything. Yeah, but he shows you with the perception that in reality, you cannot really see your face. So does that mean you don't have a face? Do you have a face? If you don't have a mirror, how do you see your face? How do you know you have a face?
Okay, so he's removing the reflective component, right? Yeah,
the projection. Yeah, that throws you back on the awareness factor. We are awareness beings. We witness, and then there's projection, And we know that tree is there. The tree is always there, but because we bring in the image in through our eyes, we bring it into our brain, and because we've seen it and and we defined it, then we say, oh, that's a tree. But in reality, we're just watching, and then it gets it's a play of reflection and projection.
It's interesting. It feels kind of correspondent just to the concept of the moon has no light of its own. It's only reflecting light from an unseen source, unless it's a day sky moon, and then it's the sun doing it. But if I was a caveman and I saw the moon, I'd think it was all lit up from itself. But the reality is it doesn't have any light of its own. It's just reflecting light from the unseen source of the sun. So does that kind of start to sync up with the headless way, with what the perception versus reflection, but minus the mirrors?
Well, the consciousness lives inside the structure of a human body. It lives inside a manifested form. But consciousness has no form. So he asks, well, is outer, inner, but the form can go through wall. The invisibility can go through the body, and it goes through anything. It's not confined.
Right.
So that's where resonance, like there's been many studies where things just from the other side, and I mean, all kinds of things, phenomena like the one I described of the Froling. It's a world beyond that we know a lot about it, but we're not practiced in embodying and being able to cultivate that, like we cultivate all the things we do, like language and things like that. But it is a language all of its own. It
brings up the marrow of a bone. I mean, it's living, it's full, but then like Skips will say, everything in the room around you is dead. And then that brings to me a architecture where every piece of the structure is just an ossification or bones, and look at this space in between. And then we project and pour qualities of feeling into how the sound and the feeling of the space resonates with us. Does it ring our bell? Is it boring? Is it just empty open space? Is it a waste of space? Is it spatial? I mean, but then what happens is almost in that silence of the space between the bones, so to speak, things occur that are living, but that are unseen.
Yeah, you're able to give, the unseen is able to be part of you.
Right.
And,
yes.
and it is a truth, because when one experiences the connection between the two that comes out of you, which is part of the individuation in Jung, you can't say, oh, you're lying. You're saying to yourself, oh, you're lying to yourself. You say, oh, you're lying. So who are you talking to? The many voices in you, who are they? Where did they come from? Who put them there? So it does exist. And a lot of it is conditioning. And when the conditioning is gotten rid of, something else occurs. There's a connectivity that occurs where the inner and outer is synchronized.
Yeah. Here's your conversation was reminding me of a poem which appears in Psychology of the Unconscious. It later became Symbols of Transformation.
Okay, Symbols of Transformation.
In 40 years later, because Jung rewrote it. But in the original, he's doing a kind of analysis on a person who he had never met, and it was a woman named Miss, I forget.
He just calls her Miss X, right?
Yeah, well, Miss Miller, but
Miss Miller.
That was the first Zoom meeting, right?
Yeah, something like that. But this poem is good and relates to all these issues that you've been discussing. So let me just read it to you. When the Eternal first made sound, a myriad ears sprang out to hear, And throughout all the universe, there rolled an echo deep and clear, all glory to the God of sound. When the Eternal first made light, a myriad eyes sprang out to look, and hearing ears and seeing eyes, once more a mighty choral took, all glory to the God of light. When the Eternal first gave love, a myriad hearts sprang into life, ears filled with music, eyes with light, pealed forth with hearts, with love all rife, all glory to the God of love. Well, it's not great poetry, but I always have liked that.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
not great poetry. It's more prosy, but it does speak directly to the story. That good call on that, because that really is aligning with the whole track that this conversation has played.
Right,
Sound,
and
it's primordial.
it is. Well, it's talking about how these senses ever developed in the first place.
Mhm.
You know,
Notice he used
Right.
sound first.
Huh?
He used sound was the first one he used. Sound is the oldest of all of them.
Yeah.
And for example, Stan Groff, who you know,
Yeah,
he
Stanislav.
says, and his holotrophic breath work and so on, and all his explorations of the fetus growing, it can't see, it can't, but it can hear, because the development of the hearing canal becomes evident right soon. So it can hear the tick of the mother's, it can hear rumbling, it can hear. So it is already absorbing sound. Sound is extremely ancient, and we carry that. This is in our being
It's
for
interesting you
millions
say
of
that,
years.
because the heart and then the tympanum in the ear, which is basically the drum head, and the ear are the first two organs I think that are more towards fully developed. I mean, the heart obviously so it can live, but then the hearing, to feel the vibration, to have that environmental awareness, swimming and water and sound transfers quicker and further through liquid than it does through air. You know, it peters out and dies in air, but underwater you can, tap a piece of metal and someone will hear it a mile away.
Yeah. So I'll just tell you a story about that. My first daughter ended up being born 10 weeks early, okay, after only 30 weeks of gestation. But two nights before she was born, my wife of the time and I went to a concert at the Eastman School of Music at the University of Rochester, which actually the Eastman Theater is downtown. So we went to this concert, and the concert was Alexander Nevsky. and if you've ever heard this, pardon?
You woke her up.
Yeah, that's what happened. I mean, she was literally,
Shocked.
kicking and hitting my wife on the inside. And 2 days later, she was born.
That's a great story. See that?
Weighing 2 pounds and 4 ounces. She says,
My God.
I'm awake now. I got to get out of here.
Drumming right back with the internal talkie drums.
That's a great story. And like people don't realize when they speak to someone or anything, the vibration of the voice, long before they even have a thought, has already communicated.
Right. And then the funny thing, or, it's funny in 45-year retrospect, okay, because that particular daughter survived and now has 3 children of her own, and she's a master's in social work, and so she's 45 years old. But anyway, the first time I saw her, I didn't manage to get to the hospital before she was born, because so anyway, she was very restless. This was Saturday night that we saw Alexander Nevsky, and then she was very restless on Monday or on Sunday. And I guess it was Sunday that she was born, because I'm at my law firm at 4 p.m, and I get a call from my wife, and she says, well, my water's broken, and this baby is coming. I said, don't call me, call the ambulance. And so she did. And fortunately, we lived in a neighborhood of volunteer firemen who had, police scanners at the time. So one of my neighbors heard the call go out for my wife and ran over and to help her a little get into the ambulance. But anyway, so I get to the hospital, and the baby's already been born. And so the very first time I see her, she's in this incubator, and she's got her mouth wide open like that. No sound, absolutely zero sound. But
That's the first sound.
Yeah. Well, she's screaming because she had to move out of you were like the party hard neighbors that played the music too loud, and she had to move out.
right.
To come out here with her scream, her silent scream.
Right.
That's a great case study. It's really a fabulous case study.
Right.
Honestly.
And then she then the doctor comes in and says, well, your daughter's very small and we can't handle her at this hospital, so we're going to have to send her to Strong Memorial Hospital, which is the teaching hospital at the University of Rochester. And boy, what a place. Even then, 45 years ago, they had a intensive care nursery, and so she went from 2 pounds 4 ounces to 4.5 pounds in 6 weeks.
Wow.
And then we were allowed to take her home, but she got transported to Strong, right? And so my wife is still there in the hospital. It was a Catholic hospital that she had delivered the baby in, and the doctor said, pardon?
Breastfeeding?
No, I didn't see any breastfeeding. She was being fed intravenously, and the amazing thing about it was that, her veins were so tiny, and this doctor, I still remember his name. He was an Iranian doctor named Dr. Dajiv, and Dr. Dajiv, and it was Give, Give, right? Dr. Dajiv. He was about 23 at the time. He was a resident, and he had, inserted the drip into her, and then after I saw her for a few moments, they took her away and took her on this transport to Strong Memorial. And he says, well, you better go right over there, because they like parents to bond with preemies. And so I had to leave my wife to go over to Strong, which I did. And I got there, and here's the nurses. They say, oh, you're the dad. Great. We want you to hold her. And I said, hold her? She's so little. And they said, don't worry, we'll wrap her up. So they wrap her up in a blanket, and they put her in my arms. Here with my arms. Reminds me of the picture of the Marine I saw just a couple days ago in Afghanistan. But they put her in my arms, and what I felt like I had was a blanket.
Blanket.
But they were very good, and insisted that we come visit every day, twice a day if we could.
Is she musical?
Yeah, well, all my daughters play the piano and so on.
Does she bang it really loud like Nesky?
No, she really played very, very well, actually.
Yeah, Nesky makes Tchaikovsky look tame. So it's like
yeah.
That's very peculiar. It's,
Yeah,
you know,
that's-
anyone doing research would really like that
Yeah.
story.
Okay, so I want to cut this short, but I want to talk about what's going to happen in the next 3 weeks, because the next Monday night class will be September the 13th. And at that class, we will not be discussing this material any longer. We will be talking about psychology and alchemy. And, you know, I'll need to know from Jordan and Raquel where you want me to send tarot people who want to follow. But this class is going to turn into something like what Jordan and I are doing on Sunday mornings.
Sunday morning. Okay.
Yeah, which is a conversation, but you know, a Jungian oriented conversation, because that seems to have become extremely popular.
Right.
Are you doing psychology and alchemy? I thought you were doing the 2 essays on analytical.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're doing the 2 essays. That's right. We agreed to do the 2 essays.
What are the 2 essays?
2 essays on psychotherapy or whatever it is.
I mean, you said it was book number 7. Is that so?
Yeah, it's 2 essays on analytical psychology, and it's volume 7 of the collected works of C.G. Jung. And so in this class, we're doing that.
Which, I mean, 2 essays is the entire book, or
Yes.
what? Okay.
Yeah, they're 2 very long essays. It's like, you know how Jung makes a paragraph that can run for 2.5 pages. Well,
Yeah, I like myself, yes.
right. But it's
By the way,
volume 7 of the collected works of C.G. Jung. You can probably get yourself a used copy.
yeah,
And-
we have all of them. There's one book I want to show here. See, Jung, Circle of
Women.
Women.
Yeah.
And what does it say there?
The Valkyries, yeah.
The Valkyries.
That's a wonderful book. That's a
Yes,
wonderful
it is.
book.
So for all those Norse lovers, the Valkyries.
Yeah. And
Raquel and Holly and Karen, the 4 people on the Sandbox Psyche Divination Studio, we're going to be getting together either later this week or next week. We're still going to need to work out a time, and then we'll get you then the link of where to then link the tarot piece as it evolves moving forward, that we can live stream on YouTube from then either Sandbox Psyche on Zoom or just from Zoom. And I'll start then when we send out notifications to, I'll then put notifications to the new current Monday night Jungian thing to reciprocate.
well, and I do want to thank everyone who has participated in the tarot with us in the last year. I think we've done a lot with it, a lot more than I expected we could get done. And I'm very much appreciative of Nick Lawrence agreeing to put together the summer sessions during my
Permutations of the tarot.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you all. This has been a real
was
treat
great.
for me.
And so, you know, going forward for our YouTube audience, you know, people like to have conversation, and so I hope that you'll consider joining our Monday night events as well. And if you want to be on the panel with us, you can see the sort of the format that Jordan and I have followed in the last, I don't know, 6 months or so since we've been doing conversations on Sunday mornings earlier. It's not aimed, the Sunday morning one is not aimed at the U.S. It's intended, actually, it originated to support China, but it also happens to be convenient to a lot of Europeans. So that's
And New
Sunday.
Zealand, Oz.
Right. And so that's the Sunday morning session. And then this Monday session is going to be more for Americans and others in the Western Hemisphere. But, it'll still be as good as it is for just in case, I don't know how you stay up so late, Justin, to participate. I appreciate your doing it.
Well, was he Frosty? He needs no sleep.
Say it again.
No, that's Dagur.
Yeah, it's
Dagur.
yeah, it's just in case. It's like
Dagur, who doesn't need any sleep
doesn't need any sleep.
Right.
because he's full of light.
Yeah, consistent coffee, and another cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So would you be sending me the tarot link, Jordan? Or
Yeah, once we need to decide our date, we still haven't set a time for us to get together to just see when everyone's available so that we can make something. I'd like to make something that's just as consistent as this, because I really like the regularity of just once a week. So that I think over time it builds a better lineage of conversation. It's two every other week and people are like, well, where were we? But once a week is close enough to not be too much, but far enough away to give some breathing room to let things open up.
there's so much.
And thank you to Neil Scott too for being up at 3
Yes,
a.m.
thank you for coming. We appreciate your audience.
But Neil and
we hope they got some juice out of it.
Justin, you might want to come to our Sunday group or our Sunday sessions, which start at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So they're not really designed for Americans. They were at 8 a.m., but Jordan moved to Taos. So for him, it's already 7 a.m.
Yeah, I'm like 7 is better than 6. So at least I've had a little bit of coffee and I can, stare out the window and go, okay, here's this consciousness.
So for Europeans though, that time works very well. It's mid-afternoon on Sundays. And
for Oz, they're 16 hours in the future kind of thing. So
what happens with Brazil?
And then
Brazil's an hour in the future. So for Brazil, it's currently 11 o'clock at night, right, Raquel?
Yes.
Yeah. And
time we all start turning orange.
So
well, I've been working on
good night.
Came up with the fifth that you wanted for the tarot. There's more than that. And there's a Menkiati already has 97. So that's all these things we haven't explored for all those interested in.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Gilda, but I really started this to be a conversation about Jungian psychology, and I want to get back to the basics of that. And I think that the tarot has been very important. I urge people to follow Jordan and Raquel off, maybe Gilda off into the hinterland at another time. And maybe Raquel will join us Monday night still, I hope. But my mess up on psychology and alchemy is that that's the topic we're going to be covering in the advanced reading group
on Wednesdays, right?
Which is on Wednesdays at 1 p.m.
Eastern. Right.
So the book Psychology and Alchemy.
Book Psychology and Alchemy, and we're also going to do Marie-Louise von Franz's book Alchemy.
Sheesh, man, you guys have your work cut out for you.
So it's a big sandbox, lots of fun.
That's
one thing, Skip, I want to say.
The rate you guys go in those groups, that's like years of material to work through.
That is years of material to work through, but I think it's helpful to people.
Yeah,
I was thinking this weekend, Skip, that the tarot as a roadmap for life over the last year, from a Jungian perspective, has been a really good anecdotal example of how Jungian depth psychology can be applied outside of psychology. So
Yeah,
utilize
sure.
tarot and other living systems that, yet I think it made the case to open up Jungian psychology not to be silo or dry or a
Yeah.
bunch of intellectual only talk. It's a lot of the heart of the matter, and
Yeah.
you get to basically the poetry of the art of life from a Jungian perspective.
Yeah, and also Gilda caused me to fall down this rabbit hole related to Ezra Pound, which
You were just taking over Sunday morning.
Well, that's because Skip likes to turn the stuff inside the cauldron. He likes to stir the cauldron.
right. And so when I fell down that rabbit hole a couple weeks ago, and I started to realize that Ezra Pound's life in many ways parallels mine in very significant ways, including the attacks by people who thought he was, a bigot of various ilks, which I don't think he was. I think he was a man of his age, and men of that age, which included my maternal grandfather, who was born in 1875, about the same as Jung. Those men, that's the way they used to speak. Mm-hmm. And so I realized that in looking at the letters of Ezra Pound and James Laughlin, who was his publisher, that, this is the way, he spoke in a very homespun manner, like he was still the hick from Idaho.
Right.
And he wasn't that by any means. He was, way beyond anybody else. And so, anyway, I'll just give the sense of this. Here's Ezra Pound's cantos, and this is only a very small part of his work. And this is the companion to Ezra Pound's cantos. Okay, so this, which is a proof of the old saw, if you can't, those who do, and those who can't teach. And so this companion is teaching what it was that Ezra Pound said. And it's an excellent book. It goes through, and every strange thing, whatever Ezra says, is explained, defined, and goes into great detail about who it is and what he's talking about and what the meaning of it is. But the combination of these two books is basically an entire liberal arts education.
All by itself, right?
All by itself.
Yeah, like being a poet, and that's what I call myself.
Mm-hmm.
Not to call myself anything else. I started calling myself that long ago. We revel in when we read the book, we like to recite it. Mm-hmm. And if they can get the real, how that came to be, and the real, what's behind it that only my being knows, mm-hmm. I will fall off the chair and I'll be impressed. It just never happens. So it's very rare unless you're in the place where Froling was in the case story we just gave, that she can zero in. So when we look at commentaries and all of that, it does add, and being a poet, I'm aware of that, it adds a lot of content and puts that, and all of that. And then eventually it's up to the reader and whatever they can, how they weave themselves into that story and bring something out. But right. Other than that, there's no last word, no matter
so
how.
What I discovered from what Gilda had sent me down was that there's an entire industry around Ezra Pound.
It's a
Um,
movement. It's a
A
movement,
movement. There's
of other poets. They call
many
themselves
and many other
Ezra.
books about him, because people are trying to understand what it was he actually did, which is pretty amazing. Yes, he was indicted for treason, but 12 years later, the Justice Department released him without trial.
Mhm.
And so they never prosecuted him for treason.
And he got caught in the flypaper of politics.
Pardon?
He got caught in the flypaper of politics.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, in so many ways, my life has paralleled his. And so I think I have a special new respect for the man.
Nice.
Yeah.
And
So that verified
so-
that you weren't alone.
yeah, and so what I'm going to do is think about how I could bring the cantos to life in some way through this channel. I don't know how. It's a colossal task, obviously. I mean, I'll never finish it if I start it, but
It would be a nice project. There's many colossal types of writings that are written in this way, and his
Well,
is
I-
original because he doesn't follow traditional rhythms per
Right.
se. It's jazzy. He's the poet who was able to embrace the jazz
yeah.
movement. Like
So,
myself. That's
I'm gonna
how
need to go. And so
Peace.
thank you all for this last year.
Take care.
And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I need to check out as well.
Presentation,
So,
Sheila.
See you soon.
all right, I'm gonna go as well. So this has been a pleasure, and I hope you all take care.
Thanks,
Hopefully
Nick.
we see each
Hope-
other
Yeah.
soon.
Hope we
See
see
you.
Thank you,
you
Gilda.
soon.
Great
You're
presentation.
welcome.
Bye, everybody.
Oh,
Good to see
I'm
you
glad
all.
you enjoyed it.
Wonderful session, Gilda. And so
Good night.
anyway, I'm
Good night,
going to,
Raquel.
pardon?
Good night, Skip. I'm
Good
done.
Night, Annabelle.
Yeah.
Good night,
Good
Thank
night,
you for
Annabelle.
coming.
Gilda. Thank you all.
Yeah. So let's not lose touch, Raquel. I know that Gilda will stay in touch, but
Me, I'm just a fly in the wall.
yeah. But I hope we don't lose touch.
Well,
'cause-
Raquel, I really honestly like to because we didn't, did you get something out of this tarot deck presentation?
Yeah, I did. I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
I don't really know much about the Northern mythology, but it was really helpful because I used to have like a simple notion of it, and you gave me a better perspective of whatever everything can be. And I did understand a lot of what you said, but it's more like, I think to me right now, it's just a matter of maybe studying a little more to understand a little better.
Oh, okay. You didn't understand. Okay. The other thing was that I didn't get to say what I was going to because all of a sudden I felt that people were very silent. It's a narrative similar to the mythic tarot. The mythic tarot speaks about a mythic. So you had to learn about all the different characters and how they play in myths. But yet, once they were put into tarot formation, it became something else. You could read it in divine form. So it has the same, it's based on myth, but it has it's there. It's exactly the same, but with the North tradition, which is
Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone. And Raquel, I hope you stay in touch and look
I will,
forward to
for
seeing
sure.
you.
all right.
Look forward to
Okay,
seeing
we'll
you.
see you in the
uh,
tarot program. Where I'm not sure where and how,
Yeah.
but
and
see you there.
we look forward to seeing you in Helena.
We got the book, the Jodorowsky after your presentation book. We got
Great.
that. It's- yeah.
So
And did you check out? He has a cat. How to teach tarot to the cat.
I still wasn't able to actually check that, but I will.
They have it in Spanish. I don't know. Do you speak Spanish?
I understand completely. I cannot speak it, but I understand.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
So for Raquel, Neil Scott says The Viking Spirit is a book on Norse mythology and introduction.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
And
I'm gonna check it out. Yeah.
The Viking
Thank you.
Spirit. And so anyway, what I was saying, Raquel, is that I look forward to seeing you in Helena next June, because what I have taken out of this Ezra Pound stuff so far is why our confluence is so important. And we need to spread it around the world. So anyway,
great.
and Gilda, I hope to see you there too. And I
Yeah,
understand.
we hope
I
we can come.
understand the terms.
Yes, it's just how the world, how it is
Well,
when
we'll
you're
see.
with a
We'll
wind and a prayer.
Well, we're all on a wing and a prayer. Absolutely. I mean, geez, just think of
Yeah.
all these people that are coming out of Afghanistan with the clothes on their back, for example. They're really doing it. But
We've been there.
yes, indeed.
Not
Anyway.
even clothes on the back, just ourselves.
Just yourselves, yeah.
And my mother in a handbag with the papers, period.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Mm. Yeah.
And I've been very close to that personally. So anyway,
Yeah.
peace. Take care of
Yes.
yourselves.
Well, thank you
See
for
you soon.
coming.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hope you
everyone.
enjoyed it. Bye.